Welcome to ECR, Informational Writing, a guide to scoring. In this video, we will look a little bit at how informational writing gets scored on state tests like the EOC and the STAR test. As you know, we use a rubric. Now, the most basic form of a rubric you can find in your test is the bulleted list that goes with your prompt. It tells you to remember to state your thesis clearly, organize your writing, develop your ideas in detail, use evidence from the selection in your response, and edit your writing for spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and grammar. Once again, that's thesis, organization, development of ideas, support, and conventions, meaning grammar, punctuation, capitalization, and spelling. Now, did you know that according to the people who score STAR and EOC exams, essays are scored up to 3 points for development and organization of ideas and up to 2 points for conventions? Your goal is to aim for a 4 or 5, and you can absolutely achieve that score with some practice and effort on your part. Take a look at the Extended Constructed Response rubric for informational writing. What do you notice? Well, I hope that you can see that this type of ECR is in response to something you have read, where you will be explaining, analyzing, and evaluating information. You have a character limit of 2,300 characters, not including spaces. As you can see, for development and organization of ideas, there are 4 areas that your essay will be graded on: the thesis, organization, evidence, and expression of ideas. To be awarded 3 full points, effective essays have a clear, well-developed thesis, effective organization, specific, well-chosen and relevant evidence, and clear and effective expression of ideas. Notice in the other point columns, the 4 areas of thesis, organization, evidence, and expression of ideas are partially developed, not developed, limited, minimal, not evident, insufficient, irrelevant, or ineffective. It's important to note that a student must score at least 1 point in this section in order to be graded in the next section, conventions. So let's look at the conventions section of the rubric. The people rating your essay will be looking for consistent command of grade level appropriate conventions. If there is inconsistency or little to no command, a student will be awarded 1 point or none. So let's try our hand at scoring an essay together. Today, we are going to focus our ratings on development and organization of ideas. We won't consider conventions in our scoring for our purposes today. But when you take a STAR or EOC exam, both will be rated, and you must score at least a 1 in the development and organization of ideas in order to receive points in conventions. Now, as we know, an extended constructed response is based on a passage or passages that you will have read. For our example, we will be reading a selection from Tending Roses by Lisa Wingate. The background information tells us, while visiting her grandmother's farm with her husband and her young son Joshua, Katie finds her grandmother's journal next to a jar of fireflies. Please follow along as the passage is read aloud. The room was quiet and dark. The uneven rhythm of green light drew my attention to the table. Watching the lightning bugs, I stepped closer. The wildflower book was lying open beside the jar. In the glow from the yard light outside, I sat down to read the spidery writing. When did the fireflies stop dancing? I read the title, then looked at the lightning bugs twinkling as if to a melody I could not hear. I thought of Grandma's face as she watched them with Joshua. her eyes bright like his, mesmerized, thoughtful, as if she, like Joshua, were trying to figure out the secrets of the world. When did the fireflies stop dancing? I read again, then plunged into the story as the glow flickered against the paper. I often found moments of silence and solitude as I walked from the barn to the house on that crooked, worn path I had trod 1,000 times. In light or darkness, in the damp hours of morning when my feet went silent through the low mist, I knew each step, each rise and fall of ground, each scent that drifted on the air, apple blossoms in the spring, honeysuckle in the hot months, curing hay in the fall. When my bones were not too weary from work done and my thoughts not too frazzled from chores left to do, I stopped there and looked over the valley. The breeze combed my hair from my face like my mother's fingers, whispering of peace, of contentment, of time passing. I looked upon those waving trees, or knobby-legged yearlings in the pasture, or the flowers by the road, and wondered how they grew so tall while my back was to them. Then I turned my back again and hurried on to my tasks. I stopped on the path once in the autumn, on a night when the moon was full, like a fresh cake of butter. Below, I saw the farmhouse, saw bits of my life through the windows, heard the faint sounds of my children laughing the way children do about nothing at all. I smiled as I gazed at the moon. There, in soft shades of blue and rose, was the celestial face I once knew from my storybooks. I thought of how many times as a girl I stared into that faraway moon and dreamed impossible dreams, wishing for the same treasures I heard my children ask for when I passed their doors at night. I thought of that part of me that once created bigger worlds, and I mourned. Through the trees, the light from a nearby farm twinkled as the leaves shivered apart like a curtain. The flicker brought me in mind of neighbors, and then of fireflies. I looked for them in the field, but the darkness was complete. It seemed only a day ago when I ran with my children, catching the tiny bits of light to make a lantern jar. Now the grass contained only the whisper of the breeze. How long had they been gone? Days or weeks, I could not say. I suppose they flew away one night as I lingered over mending, or soiled tableware, or a child's lessons. They flew away while my head was bent to task and took no time to bid goodbye. But I knew they bade farewell to my children. I knew my children saw them fly away like sparks from summer's waning flame. My children mourned their passing as I once had, and knew, I was sure, the very hour when the last of them stopped dancing. I laid the book on the table and carried the jar outside. In the darkness of the yard, I lifted the lid and promised myself I would remember to look for the fireflies tomorrow night. Okay, so here is the extended constructive response prompt. It says, read Tending Roses, which we just did. Based on the information in the text, write a response to the following. Explain how reading the journal leads Katie to remind herself to look for fireflies. Write a well-organized essay that includes specific evidence from the text to support your answer. So let's take a look at a few student essays and compare them to the informational rubric. Remember, we are wanting to see if the thesis is clear and well developed, if the organization is effective, if the evidence is specific, well chosen, and relevant, and if the expression of ideas is clear and effective. All right, so here's our first student essay. Let's read it and then consider its rating. Katie finds herself looking for fireflies because of what she has read in her grandma's journal. Would you change the way you see things from reading grandma's journal? One reason Katie finds herself looking for fireflies reminded her of her grandma and her son Joshua. The second reason is she notices that her grandma begins to write about how time passes without you knowing. The third reason is how grandma says that just how fireflies go, time goes as well. The last reason is that she never got to say goodbye to her childhood time because it went by without her knowing. Reading Grandma's journal, Katie starts finding herself looking for fireflies or now watching the time. I would change the way I see things because I wouldn't want too much time to pass without me knowing. All right, what do you think about this student's essay? Now, remember the prompt, ask students to explain how reading the journal leads Katie to remind herself to look for fireflies. Now, let's think about the areas on the rubric. Is the thesis clear and well developed? Well, I think the student's thesis is partially developed, but it is not clear. And what about the essay's organization? I like the way it's structured. The student begins with an introduction. It's followed by a body paragraph, and it ends with a conclusion. She enumerates her reasons in her body paragraph, and the organization of her essay makes sense, and in my opinion, it is effective. How about her evidence? Is it specific, well chosen, and relevant? It is, wouldn't you agree? Finally, the expression of ideas. Is it clear and effective? I don't know about you, but I found myself having to reread to understand what the student was trying to say. So I think this is an area where she can improve from her basic expression of ideas to become more clear and effective. So let's look at another example. How about we? Here is another student example essay. So we'll read it together and then we'll rate it. In the story, Tending Roses, Katie reads her grandmother's journal. After reading it, she promises to look out for fireflies the next day. I believe she did this because her grandmother's journal entry made her realize how she does not pay attention to the outside world enough. In her grandmother's journal, her grandma expressed how she remembered what it felt like when she had seen those sights so mesmerizing. Those sights that her grandma described seemed comforting and welcoming. I believe this brings Katie to want to experience the same thing because she wants to live in her grandmother's memories. All right, it's a short essay, but let's compare it to the rubric. What do we think about the thesis? Does this essay have one? Is it clear and well developed? Well, I hope you agree with me that it is not clearly stated. We definitely have to infer, perhaps imply the thesis, and so it's definitely partially developed, maybe not even developed at all. What about the organization of this essay? Well, I do see organization of this singular paragraph. It is effective. There is somewhat of an introduction. There's a body in there and a conclusion. I just would like to have seen that developed more into an introductory paragraph, perhaps a body paragraph, and a conclusion. Does this student have specific, well chosen, and relevant evidence? Well, I do see a sentence that gives textual evidence to support her thesis. Um, and I think it is specific and well chosen and relevant. And what about the student's expression of ideas? Well, I felt it was clear and effective. I could definitely understand what the student was saying, and I could follow along, and I did feel like it was clear and effective. So let's look at our last example. This example is on 2 slides, and I'll read, you'll follow along, and then we'll talk about it. In the excerpt from Tending Roses, Katie finds her grandmother's journal next to a firefly jar. After reading the journal, Katie goes outside and releases the fireflies, promising to herself that she will look for the fireflies tonight. I believe the reason she does this is because the journal is all about cherishing your childhood. Katie's grandma was someone who was always busy with her tasks. Quote, I looked upon those waving trees or knobby-legged yearlings in the pasture or the flowers by the road and wondered how they grew so tall while my back was to them. Then I turned my back again and hurried on to my tasks. End quote. She now doesn't have time to truly appreciate those things outside. Quote, I saw the farmhouse, saw bits of my life through the windows, heard the faint sounds of my children laughing the way children do about nothing at all. End quote. Grandma explains more and more of those precious times with her children. Paragraph 8 further reinforces the theme by saying how she mourned for her childhood. She misses how she wished for the same treasures she heard her children ask for when she passed their doors at night, that part of her that once created bigger worlds. After reading this, Katie promises to look for the fireflies tomorrow. The fireflies are a symbol of memories that you may never have again, so you must cherish them. Going out tomorrow to look for the fireflies means to Katie that she will find her childhood once again. All right. So, what do you think about this essay? Did you see the student's thesis in the introduction of the essay? It was clear and well developed. The organization of the essay was also effective. Each paragraph had a purpose and it flowed nicely. How about the evidence the student used to support the thesis? We saw evidence that was taken directly from the text, and it was very specific, well chosen, and relevant. I also thought the student's expression of ideas was clear and effective, and overall, I felt it was an effective essay. So, returning to the ECR informational rubric, you can absolutely write an essay that scores a 3 in development and organization of ideas if you focus on your thesis, organization, evidence, and expression of ideas. And you can earn those 2 points for conventions by demonstrating consistent command of grade level conventions. You are no doubt capable of writing an informational essay that shows your writing skills at this level. So continue to practice and put forth your best effort. And thank you for watching this video, and good luck to you.